The town of Yomashiro was a forgotten speck on the map, nestled in a valley where the mountains seemed to lean inward, as if guarding a secret. Its streets were quiet, its people unhurried, and its days passed in predictable rhythm, until the children began to vanish. Eiko Tanaka, a journalist for the local paper Yomashiro Times, first heard of the disappearances over a cup of bitter coffee in the newsroom. The headline was stark: "Third child missing in 2 weeks." The latest was Hana Mori, a 10-year-old girl with a penchant for collecting smooth river stones. Aiko's editor, a chain-smoking man named Sato, tossed the assignment her way with a grunt. "Find the angle," he said. "People are scared." Aiko drove to Yomashiro Elementary, a squat building with peeling paint, to speak with the teachers. The air was heavy with unease as she sat in the principal's office, a room cluttered with faded certificates and a wilting fern. Ms. Yamada, a teacher with tired eyes, recounted how Hana and the other missing children, Kenta and Mio, had been seen playing near the old temple on the edge of town before they vanished. "They were drawn to it," Yamada whispered, twisting a tissue in her hands. "That place, it's cursed. Everyone knows." Aiko scribbled notes. Her curiosity piqued. The temple, abandoned for decades, was a relic of whispered legends, a place parents warned their children to avoid. Her next stop was the Mori household, a modest home with a sagging roof. Hana's mother, Emi, greeted Aiko with hollow eyes, her face pale as if drained of life. Inside, the air was thick with grief. Emi led Aiko to the living room, where Hana sat cross-legged on the floor, her back to them. The girl had returned 2 days ago after 5 days missing, but she was wrong. Aiko's breath caught as Hana turned. The girl's face was a smooth, featureless expanse. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just skin stretched taut like a canvas. Yet from that blank void came a voice, soft and rhythmic, reciting words Aiko couldn't understand. The sounds were guttural, ancient, twisting in the air like smoke. Emi clutched Aiko's arm. "She came back from the forest," she sobbed. "Like that." Aiko knelt beside Hana, her recorder trembling in her hand. The words poured from the girl, a cadence that felt alive, pressing against Aiko's temples like a headache. "Que vadis nomen es vacuum." The journalist didn't recognize the language. It wasn't Japanese, Latin, or anything she'd encountered in her studies. Each syllable seemed to hum, leaving a faint aftertaste of dread. Aiko's skin prickled, and for a moment she felt a blankness in her mind, as if a thought had been plucked away. She stood abruptly, thanking Emi and promising to follow up. As she left, a neighbor, an old man with a hunched back, pulled her aside. "I saw her," he rasped. "Hana." She walked out of a fog near the temple, her face gone. Something followed her, a shadow that wasn't there. That night, Aiko pored over her notes in her cramped apartment, the glow of her laptop casting shadows on the walls. She searched online for Yomashiro's history, digging into the temple's past. The site was sparse, but she found a forum post from years ago buried in an archive. It mentioned the Devourer, a figure from local folklore said to punish those who spoke its name. The post was incomplete, the author's account deleted. Aiko frowned, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The name felt heavy, like a stone sinking in her chest. Unable to sleep, Aiko drove to the temple under a moonless sky. The structure loomed at the edge of a pine forest, its wooden beams blackened by time, its roof caved in like a broken ribcage. She stepped inside, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. The air was damp, smelling of rot and something metallic. Her beam fell on the walls, revealing carvings, symbols that twisted and looped, defying geometry. They seemed to shift, under her gaze pulsing faintly as if alive. Aiko's heart raced. She snapped photos, but when she checked her phone, the images were blurred, smeared into grey static. A chill ran through her. The temple felt aware. As she turned to leave, a sound stopped her. A low hum, like the poems Hannah recited. It came from deeper within, where the altar stood. Aiko hesitated, her rational mind screaming to flee, but her journalist's instinct pushed her forward. The altar was bare, except for a single stone, etched with the same symbols. She reached, out her fingers brushing its surface. The hum grew louder, and for a split second, Aiko felt a void in her mind, as if her own name had slipped away. She stumbled back, gasping, and ran to her car. Back home, Aiko tried to write her article, but something nagged at her. She stared at her notes, rereading Hannah's name. For a moment it looked unfamiliar, like a word from a foreign tongue. She shook her head, blaming exhaustion, but the unease lingered. She typed a single line before shutting her laptop. Whatever is taking the children. It's not human. As she lay in bed, the hum from the temple echoed in her ears, and she wondered if she'd brought something back with her. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from Emmy. Another child had vanished. Aiko's article on the missing children hit the Yomishiro Times like a stone in a still pond, rippling fear through the town. Her words were careful, describing the disappearances and Hannah's return without mentioning the temple's carvings, or the name, the Devourer. Yet by noon, her inbox was flooded with anonymous messages. Most were pleas for answers, but one stood out: "Stop naming what you don't understand. Silence is safety." The sender's email was a string of random characters, untraceable. Aiko's stomach churned, but she saved the message, her resolve hardening. She needed to know more. Her first lead came from the town library, a dusty building that smelled of old paper and mildew. Taro, the librarian, was a frail man with wire-rimmed glasses and a habit of muttering to himself. Aiko asked about the temple, and his eyes narrowed. "You're the journalist," he said, voice low. "Be careful. Some stories don't want to be told." After a moment's hesitation, he retrieved a leather-bound diario from a locked drawer. Its pages were brittle, filled with cramped handwriting from a century ago. The author, a priest, described a cult that worshipped the Devourer of Names, a being that fed on identities through chanted poems. "They believed it gave them knowledge beyond the stars," Taro whispered. "But it took their faces first." Aiko's pulse quickened. The diario mentioned rituals at the temple, using words to bridge the void. That evening, Aiko returned to the temple, driven by a mix of dread and determination. The forest was silent, the air thick with the scent of pine and something sour. As she approached, she heard a low, rhythmic chant, like a heartbeat echoing through the trees. She crouched behind a crumbling wall, peering into the temple's heart. A dozen figures in hooded robes stood in a circle, their voices weaving a melody that felt wrong, as if it bent the air itself. At the center, a child, another without a face, stood motionless, reciting verses in that same guttural tongue Hannah had used. The words hit Aiko like a physical force, a wave of emptiness, washing over her. She clutched her head, fighting the sensation that her memories were fraying at the edges. She fled, her breath ragged, but the town no longer felt safe. Walking back to her car, she noticed the faces of passers-by seemed blurred, their features smudged like a painting left in the rain. A woman selling fruit at a stall smiled, but her eyes seemed too far apart, her nose indistinct. Aiko blinked hard, telling herself it was exhaustion, but the unease clung to her. At home, she tried to transcribe the chants she'd heard, but the words slipped from her mind like water through a sieve. The next day, Aiko sought out another child, Kenta, who had returned faceless like Hannah. His parents let her in reluctantly, their eyes darting nervously. Kenta sat in a corner, his blank face tilted as if listening to something unseen. When Aiko asked a question, his voice answered in that alien tongue, and the room seemed to dim. Nomen est nihil, devoramus. Her recorder caught the words, but when she played them back, static drowned out half the syllables. Worse, she forgot her own question mid-sentence, her mind stumbling over a blank space where her thoughts should have been. Kenta's mother grabbed Aiko's arm, whispering, "Don't listen too long. It takes you." At the newsroom, the atmosphere was unraveling. Sato, her editor, snapped at a colleague for forgetting a deadline, but Aiko noticed he struggled to recall the man's name. Another reporter, Miki, complained that words felt slippery, as if they dissolved before she could speak them. Aiko's article had stirred something, and the town was paying the price. She kept her suspicions about the cult to herself, fearing that speaking them aloud would worsen things. Her final lead was Kenji Sato, a reclusive linguist who lived in a cluttered house on the town's outskirts. Taro had mentioned him in passing, noting his obsession with dead languages. Aiko knocked on his door, but no one answered. Peering through a window, she saw stacks of books and papers covered in the same twisting symbols she'd found in the temple. A shadow moved inside, and she ducked, her heart pounding. Kenji was connected. She was sure of it. That night, Aiko dreamed of a void, a vast emptiness where words floated like stars, only to be swallowed by an unseen maw. She woke, gasping, her own name feeling foreign on her tongue. Her phone buzzed, with a new message from the anonymous sender. "You heard the chant. It knows you now." She stared at the screen, realizing the cult wasn't just a relic of the past. It was active, and she was already entangled in its web. Aiko's world was unraveling. The town of Yomashiro had become a gallery of blurred faces, where neighbors passed each other with uncertain glances, their features softening like wax under an unseen flame. The air carried a faint hum, the same cadence Aiko had heard in the temple, now seeping into the streets. Her own mind felt porous, names and memories slipping through cracks she couldn't see. Determined to stop the devourer of names, she resolved to confront its source, starting with Kenji Sato, the linguist she suspected led the cult. Under cover of dusk, Aiko slipped into Kenji's house through an unlocked back door. The interior was a labyrinth of books and papers, their pages dense with the looping symbols from the temple. She found a notebook filled with translations of poems in languages long dead, Sumerian, Akkadian, and others she couldn't name. Each was titled Hymn to the Devourer, with notes scribbled in the margins. The bridge widens with every voice. Her hands trembled as she pocketed the notebook, but a creak from the hallway froze her. Kenji stood there, his face partially dissolved, one eye unnaturally wide, his mouth a smudged line. "You've read the words," he said, his voice a low rasp. "You're part of it now." Kenji's words were not a threat but a proclamation. He spoke of the Devourer as a key to cosmic truths, a force that consumed identities to reveal the universe's hidden structure. "Faces are lies," he said, stepping closer. "The Devourer strips them away to show what's real." Aiko noticed his fingers twitching as if tracing invisible symbols. She backed away, demanding to know why he targeted children. Kenji's laugh was hollow. "Their voices are pure. They open the bridge fastest." Desperate, Aiko fled, his words echoing in her mind. The town was collapsing into chaos. At the market, a vendor shouted prices, but the words came out garbled, meaningless. A man stared at his wife, unable to recall her name, his face half erased. Aiko passed a group of faceless children, chanting in unison, their voices a tide that pulled at her thoughts. She clutched the stolen notebook, its weight her only anchor. The poems were the key, she was sure of it. If she could destroy the cult's records, she might sever the Devourer's connection to Yomashiro. Aiko returned to the temple, the air now thick with a sour, metallic tang. She carried a lighter and a can of kerosene from her car. Her plan: simple: burn the cult's artifacts. Inside, the walls pulsed with symbols, their glow brighter than before. At the altar, she found a stack of ancient pergaminos, their parchment brittle but inscribed with the same hymns. As she doused them with kerosene, footsteps echoed. Kenji and 5 hooded cultists emerged, their faces in various stages of dissolution. "You can't stop it," Kenji said, holding a knife etched with symbols. "Speak the hymn, and you'll understand." Aiko's fear gave way to fury. She dodged Kenji's lunge, knocking over a cultist and scattering their ritual candles. The flames caught the kerosene-soaked pergaminos, and fire roared to life. The cultists screamed, their chants faltering, and the hum in the air weakened. Aiko grappled with Kenji, his strength unnatural, his breath hot with words she couldn't comprehend. She shoved him into the altar, and the stone slab cracked, the symbols on it dimming. The fire spread, consuming the pergaminos, and the faceless children outside fell silent, collapsing like marionettes with cut strings. As the temple burned, Aiko stumbled outside, coughing through the smoke. The cultists vanished into the forest, Kenji among them, his parting glare promising retribution. In the days that followed, Yomashiro began to heal. Faces re-emerged, tentative and pale, like skin after a burn. Hana and Kenta spoke their first normal words, their parents weeping in relief. But Aiko felt no victory. At home, she stared into her mirror, her reflection wavering. Her nose seemed flatter, her eyes less distinct. Her name, when she whispered it, felt like a stranger's. She drafted a final article, a warning never to speak of the devourer, but her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Writing its name might summon it again. She deleted the draft, her heart pounding. In her dreams the void lingered, a hungry expanse where words were devoured. Aiko knew the devourer wasn't gone, just waiting, patient, in the spaces between silence.